what we would call a pregnant phrase. It sounds like there's something more there. It's like when you have a story and you says, once upon a time, you're expecting a story with an ending attached to it. Crystal, my little girl with 4 little girls now, when she was 8 or 9, she wrote a story. I helped her with it, and she said, "What do I write about?" And Dad. Anyway, the story was really good and well accepted, and she was part of the Northrop Fry Festival, and she read her story. So it was a room like this full of people, and she read her story, and they gave her 10 minutes, and the story was just about done, and they said, "Okay, your 10 minutes are up." And people from the state said, "Let her finish." And so everyone wanted to know what the ending was. It was only another minute longer, and so she got to read the end of her story. Well, we're going to look at the beginning of the story, but we know that at the other end there's an ending. And we know that Daniel and Isaiah and, of course, John spoke of the ending. There is an ending coming. I'm going to want to mention a few things that we get because of the way God decided to create the world. We get 24-hour days, we get 7-day weeks, we have months, we have seasons, and we have years. All of these are a direct result of Him choosing the way He chose instead of another way. We call a day the time it takes for the Earth to turn on its axis once. And the funny thing is that other planets have a day, but it's not the same. Mercury is 58 days to turn on its axis once. Venus is 243 days. Earth and Mars are about 24 hours. And the other 4 planets are between 10 and 16 hours. These are huge planets, and they only take 16 hours to rotate. I don't know how fast they're going, but you would get your hair blown back if you were standing on a tall hill on one of those. Well, we call a year the time it takes for the Earth to go around the Sun. But other planets have a different year. Mercury is 88 days. Venus is 125 days. Mars is 687 days. And Jupiter is over 4,000. Saturn over 10,000. Uranus over 30,000. And Neptune over 60,000 days. Neptune takes 165 Earth years to go around the Sun once. It's a long time. I'm glad that God picked the place He put our Earth because 365 days, 24-hour days works much better than anything else. Now there's something like 200 conditions that have to be spot on or Earth wouldn't have life on it. There's all sorts of conditions like the tilting of the axis of the Earth. It would get too hot for life to exist and too cold in other places. The fact that the moon is the exact place it is means we have tides that are, well, here they're quite tall, but most places they're only 3 or 4 feet. But if it was closer, we'd have 1,000-foot tides, and it would just devastate the coastline, and you couldn't go in the ocean. If the moon was more than 28 days or less, there would be a problem too. All those 200 conditions have to exist exactly. And if you said, well, there is no creator, they just happened, well, the chance of that is 1 in the number that would, if you numbered all the atoms in the universe, that would be the number. It's a long number, impossible, but God was able to do it. No problem at all. He did it. He did all these things. And the those big planets we talked about, they have a purpose too. They stop asteroids. Their gravitational pull stops them from coming in and banging into us. Now, he made it in such a way too that he sent us a message. We have the message that the sun, lots of people have throughout history have worshipped the sun, but they have no excuse. See, light was created on the first day, and the sun and the moon and stars weren't created till the fourth day. So, sun and the moon didn't bring us light. We can't worship them for light. That's not how it happened. Now, we have a 7-day week because he chose to make everything in 6 days and added the 7th day of rest. Now, I said that the spinning of the earth gives us a day. If we didn't know about God, we know a day is 24 hours roughly, and a month is around 28 days, and a year is 365 days. But we didn't have the week. God gave us the week so that we would recognize that he is the creator, and we wouldn't forget it. He said after every day that it was good. But the story is told by Moses, and at that point he knew that man had sinned. He included the idea that because there was a beginning, there would also be an end. Now, there's a popular alternative to this story we have in Genesis. It's called evolution. Lots of people believe it, but just because lots of people believe it doesn't make it true. Doesn't make it right. And it creates more problems than it solves. The purpose of evolution, its stated purpose, is to come up with a way to explain us, the earth and all of us, without the need for God. That's his purpose. The problem is, without God as the lawmaker, you can't say that people like Hitler were wrong, the laws they made, or that Attila the Hun was wrong for going across into Europe and rape and pillaging and burning. Evolution would say that he did a great job because the whole point of evolution is that you reproduce. And they say that 1 in 6 people are related to Attila the Hun. He had so many children, but most of the mothers were raped in order to get pregnant. It's not a good thing. But evolution would only praise him because he was successful. Now, I spoke a couple weeks ago about racism and how Darwin had produced his book on evolution, and racism went up by orders of magnitude. If you choose evolution instead of the way that the Bible says God did it, you're stuck with all these problems. And you can't even call them bad because the only definition for good that evolution has is reproducing, and that would be Attila the Hun. So this is the answer right here to racism. God took 6 days to make everything, and on the 6 days he made all the land animals and all the men and women. Or he made man and woman. Now, the problem evolution has is that it needs more time. If one animal is going to evolve into another animal, it needs lots and lots and lots of time, and all you've got is 24 hours. It's obviously not enough time. Now, there's something that's interesting. As you read this, God named things. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he made light. He picked that name. But when he made man, from then on, Adam got to name everything. And it's interesting, God brought the animals to Adam to name them. And I was thinking, we have a deer. They run across your yard. They stand in your backyard. And deer is not just deer. Deer is fawn, and deer and buck and doe. And so you wonder if Adam came up with all four names. And you wonder also, did he come up with names like a pack of dogs or a litter of puppies? Those are all names of animals. We don't know, of course, but we know he was smart enough that he saw that there was a male and female of each of these species, and he somehow was shorted. He didn't get a female. And it was something he thought needed fixed. In creation, the only thing in all of creation that God didn't call good was the fact that man was alone. Everything else was good. So in those two chapters, chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis, we find that God created man and gave him all of these abilities to observe, and they were very smart. There's no one smarter than Adam and Eve. Everything has gone down from there. The only thing that evolution is a movement upward. We've had a movement downward. Adam and Eve had no diseases. They lived 900 years plus. We have lots of diseases, and we live 85 or 80 or 75. The answer to racism is that creation. There was only one man and one woman who started everything, therefore we're all related, we're all family. There is no other, there isn't 5 races, there isn't any reason for racism. You see, God didn't allow the argument of evolution to be one with any strength, and we shouldn't allow it to have any either. Now, in order to properly go through all these verses, I'd have to spend a couple months, but I'm going to do it fast. So I'm going to have certain observations, and so that you'll think, well, he could have added other things, but you have to go with what I got. Now, number 1 is, does darkness get a bad rap? I'm going to read 1 to 5. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and the darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness, and he called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And that was the evening and the morning, one day. Now, darkness is seen to be the absence of light and energy. The second law of thermodynamics says that everything is running down, and eventually you'll come to a point where there's only darkness and everything is at absolute zero. It could be called the result of sin. The second law of thermodynamics is what happens when you get sin in the world, sin in the universe. Well, God made light and called it good. And it doesn't say he called the darkness good. Darkness is what you have if nothing is created. All through the Bible, God reminds us that darkness and evil are close bedfellows. So the answer to my question, does darkness get a bad rap, is yes, it does. And it deserves it because it's the absence of light, and light is always associated with God. The thing that changed was night was okay until sin came. And then it took on the bad rap that darkness has. I had some people come into Apex this past week. Construction workers, contractors, and the guy, we were talking about homeless people and how much problems they were causing. And he said, yes, my friend bought a 9-unit apartment building, and we were coming in to renovate it. And between the time it was purchased and the time he came to actually do the work, homeless people had gotten in and they stripped all the copper wire and all the copper plumbing out of the building. There was so much damage in the building, the only thing left to do was tear it down. And another contractor said, yes, and he was speaking of himself and people who build things, we build things all day. When we get tired, we go home and we go to sleep at night, and those people come out and they do all sorts of things. He talked about how much damage, and it's all done at night, and he said that they put fans, the little bathroom fan, it has a wire this long that you hook up, and they stripped off that wire. What's that much wire worth? Well, it's worth $75 or $100 to buy a new fan. The wire itself, the copper in the wire is a penny, but the cost to replace it is $100 to $150. See, that was the problem. All that stuff is done at night. The guy said he parked, he had a four-wheeler, and he wanted to keep it safe, and it was in the garage, and he parked his car right up against, tight up against the door so no one could get in and get his four-wheeler, and they crawled underneath the car and released the linkage on the parking brake and pushed the car ahead and stole his four-wheeler. Well, that's no wonder the Bible says over and over it connects night and darkness with evil. Well, number 2 is more separated. This is verse 6 to 8. Then God said, "Let there be an expanse in the middle of the waters, and let it separate the water from the waters." God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse and the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. And he called the expanse heaven. That was evening, and that was morning, the second day. Now, on the first day, God separated light from darkness. And the second day, he separated the water below from the water above. And the third day, he separated the water from the land. Throughout the Bible, God separates things. He separated the Israelites from the rest of the world. They were his chosen people. Jesus told parables of separating the goats from the sheep, the wheats from the tares. There was a lot of separating going on. He chose some and didn't choose others. Well, one of the lies of socialism is that they'll make everyone equal. There's a joke in socialism that everyone is equal, just some are more equal than others. It's kind of a truism. See, the problem is there are certain things that only God can do right. Man can try, but we don't usually get it right. And that's the problem with socialism. They have this idea, but without God, that idea will not work. Because the only way anything of that type will work, only God can separate and only God can bring together. Number 3, the first and best gardener, 10 to 13. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seeds, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit, and after their kind, and seeds in them." It was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seeds after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seeds in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. That was evening and morning, the third day. Whoever plants things likes to watch, wait. There's lots of work goes with it. I'm not saying there isn't, but you have to watch and wait for God to make it grow. And you would, if you do that, you appreciate the fact that you have this account of God creating all the things that grow on the earth. There was a story on the CBC radio of a man who hated gardening. He absolutely hated it. As a child, he was made to weed, and he refused to weed. He pushed them down, and he buried them, covered them over with ground. And their parents would come back 3 days later, and they'd pop through again. Well, I thought and they would be this tall. You were supposed to weed. Well, so as an adult, he hated gardening and he didn't do any. His backyard was a mess. But then his wife got breast cancer. And he decided on his own that because she liked gardening, he would make a garden for her. And he changed the whole backyard and the whole front yard into a garden. Now, the difference is that when God created things, there was no such things as weeds to choke out the good stuff you want to grow. There was no thistles or burdocks, and no plants that want to kill you, or no toadstools that look like mushrooms but you can't eat them, and no poison ivy. Only plants and flowers that brought pleasure. And there was no bugs to eat your crop when you decide to grow it. Number 4, he made stars also. 14. And God said, let there be light in the expanse of the heaven to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be for light in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and it was so. And he made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. And he made the stars also, and placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, to separate the light and the darkness. And God saw that it was good. It was evening and morning, the 4th day. Well, he made stars also. It's like a comment that you say, I weeded the garden and I watered the garden, and oh yeah, I turned off the water afterwards. That's kind of that kind of saying. And he made stars also. So I was thinking about that. He made stars also. Well, think of a garden, the man who planted a garden, and you know what baby's breath is. That's those little tiny flowers, they stick with roses, is a different color. They're just tiny. And I looked up, what's big flowers? What's a big flower? Well, the Queen of the Andes is 50 feet tall, and the blossom, is 30 feet tall. That's a big flower. You put a dozen of those in a vase, you better have a strong table to set the vase on. But I looked up stars. How big are stars? And somebody came up with this, they have a dot, and that's the Earth, and then the sun is over here, and it's huge. And then they put another dot, and that's the sun. And then they put another big, and then they put another dot, that's that big one. Well, some of our stars are smaller than the sun, but some of them are as big as our whole solar system. Huge. 2,134 times as big as our sun. And there's ones that are different colors, and there's ones that blink, and there's ones that send out sound. Amazing stuff. And all of that for also. All of that amazement, and all that variety for also. And I turned off the water. I also turned off the water. Number 5 is fish and fowl. 20 to 23. Then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. And God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the water swarms after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. That was evening, and that was morning, the 5th day. Now, what a variety of different fish and birds. Krill is like a little shrimp, but it's so small that you almost need a magnifying glass to see it. And that's at one end. And at the other end, you have the blue whale, which can be 105 feet long and it eats 7,800 pounds of krill every day. That's its meal. But all these creatures, take the hummingbird, how small a hummingbird is. There's one's called a bee hummingbird, which is like a little over 2 inches long. And then there's another extinct bird with a wingspan of 24 feet. That's a big bird. You'd have a big oven to cook that for Thanksgiving. All these creatures fairly scream that they were created. In fact, whales, the blue whale, he screams at 188 decibels. And a plane taking off is 140. So you can imagine how loud that would be. The kids are home. They scream at 188 decibels. You want they blow the windows out. But the point is, it says that another blue whale 1,000 miles away can hear that scream. Incredible, right? How is that possible? We use the word as a slur, bird brain, because a bird's brain is about the size of a pea. But we talked about this, how they can, 10,000 can go like this, and they can swoop and around, and they land, and no one crashes into each other. And I watched as I was coming, field of them all took off together. And taking off is the hard part, right? And they all took off in unison, and no one smashed into one another, and they were all took off. How's that possible? And how can fish swim the same way and not run into each other? Amazing. I thought about Adam naming everything, and I wondered if he named flock for a group of birds that took off together. Did he come up with that name too? Well, number 6 is, what do you do on the last day? 24 to 27. Then God said, let the cattle and the creeping things and the beasts of the earth after their kind, and it was so. Bring forth creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their kind, it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the cattle and over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Now, I'm not sure why God chose this way, this particular way, why the birds were on day 4 and the animals were on day 5. And the only thing I could think of was it's orders of magnitude, bigger and bigger and more important, like compared to a krill that you have to, this tiny compared to a lion is a big jump, right? But all I can say is he chose to make man last because man was the ultimate, the biggest and the best of his creations. Anybody who says, well, I look at the sky and I feel insignificant, is the wrong attitude. You look at the sky and you should feel significant. The stars in the sky are also. We were put there for light for us. That's their function. And you think about this, and we are going to, the only thing left at the end, when you get to the end, the only thing that's going to be left is us. The stars aren't going to be saved. The sea or the sea creatures, and none of those things are going to be saved. It's just us. We're the most significant thing in the eyes of God. All the rest is destroyed by fire. And there's going to be a new universe made for us to enjoy. These stars aren't saved. The sea creatures aren't saved. None of the creatures in the Irish Rover song are saved either. Green alligators and long-necked geese, some humpty-back camels and some chimpanzees, cats and rats and elephants, and as sure as you're born, not even the unicorn will be saved, just us. So what are we going to do with all this? As you go through this account of creation, you find it's a story. Crystal called me up a couple times in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and she was having a problem with Holly. Holly gets upset. Mike said, you must make sure the door's locked. So she gets out of bed every night and goes and makes sure the door's locked. But anyway, so she was upset, and she said, Dad, when we were kids, you would tell us stories about you when you were a kid, and you'd have a moral to the story. You'd say, well, this is, and this is why. And she said, can you tell Holly a story with a moral to it? And so I did. And she was happy, and that was, so she said, I don't know if she's going to want to do this every couple days, but anyway, the point is, the Bible is full of stories with a moral point and a moral lesson, and they all point toward the coming of Jesus and his work of redemption for us from our sin. The story of Joseph points to Jesus. He saved his family. The story of Abraham taking Isaac up, and he's going to, and then there's God provides. It's called the mountain where God provides. It's a story that points to Jesus coming and saving us. As I read the commentaries about this passage, this first chapter of Genesis, it talked about a beginning and an end. It was there. And it's appropriate that it's there because if you read the 3rd chapter, you come to the fall. And Moses wrote Genesis under the guidance of the Holy Spirit so that it made sense that he would include what's going, it's broken, how do we fix it? What's the moral of the story? Well, I read in Revelations for chapter 10. This is the end. Revelations 10. And I saw another strong angel coming down out of heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow upon his head, and his face was like the sun, and his feet were like pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a small book that was open. He placed his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. And he cried out with a loud voice as when a lion roars. And when he had cried out, the 7 peals of thunder uttered their voices. And then if you move on to number 5, it says, Then the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land lifted his right hand to the heavens and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things in it, and earth and the things in it, and the sea and the things in it, that there would be delay no longer. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of God is finished, as he preached to his servants the prophets. He's saying that all of that delay will be no longer be any longer. And he goes on to say that John has to go talk to that angel. Can you imagine an angel that's big enough to stand on the earth, the sea, and the dry land, and go say, give me your book, it's in your hand. And that's what he did. And he said it's going to be sweet when you eat it in your mouth, and it's going to make your stomach sour. Well, early on in Revelation, there's a story where the saints who were martyred are saying, when will you finish this up? Well, this is it. It's being finished right here. All of those people, John would have all the 12 disciples, 10 of them were martyred. He was the only one that wasn't. And he would say, that sweet in your mouth, good. The people that have done this great atrocities, this horribleness, will be punished. And we will be vindicated. And so that's the sweetness in his mouth. But the bitterness in his stomach is realizing that also, this is forever. This is an eternal punishment, and there will be a lot of people that you will enjoy being around that will also have refused God's great gift. And they too will be punished. And that will make your stomach sick knowing that people from our neighborhood, people over at the fair today, are going to go to eternity without Jesus. So we want them to be saved. We want their ending to not be an ending at all. We want it to be a new beginning that's so amazing that heaven will be like, do you remember the old black and white TVs, and they had lines going across and it wasn't very clear and it was in black and white, and to compare that to a 4 HD big screen TV that you would swear was, that's the difference. We want them to have that. That's what we're going to have. We're going to have eternity. So, my only suggestion is, pick somebody and say, I'm going to pray for that person. And pick up the phone and call them and say, can we have an eternal conversation? And maybe they'll say no, and we'll talk about the weather, but we can do all those things even with COVID. We can say, look, I was reading in Revelations, or I was reading in Genesis, and I've thought of you, and I thought to call you, and I thought to say, you know, if we could have a conversation, it would make me feel better. Let me tell you about salvation. Let's pray.